Hello, I'm Tim Benedict, and this is my presentation on the book Unearthing Joy by Goldie Muhammad. Thought I'd start with a quote. Just as flowers are beautiful, children are genius. We don't give a flower its beauty. It is beautiful because that its nature. In much the same way, we don't give children their genius. It is already there. We're gonna her book definitely dives into the inherent qualities of people, children, and joy and genius that is part of their history and part of what is driving them forward. So just a little bit about what we're going to cover in this. Start by talking about the author, Dr. Gulnasar Muhammad. Goldie for short. She has her PhD in literacy, language, and culture at the University of Illinois at Chicago. She's currently an associate professor of language and literacy at Georgia State University, where she's the director of the Urban Literacy Collaborative and Clinic. They work kind of implementing her Hill model framework in the community while educating others. She's had every job in the school field, from designing curriculum from K to 12 with a focus in literacy instruction, assessment, and professional development. She also was a middle school teacher in reading, social studies, and language arts. And this is her second book. It's kind of the sequel to her first, Cultivating Genius, where she outlined the five pursuits that enhance genius, with pursuit being a word that has origins in African American history of this desire to be self-determined. So in this book, she adds the fifth pursuit, which is joy. Um, so she has formulated her own framework out of the CHRE model that's called the Hill pedagogy. Um, and that's an acronym for histories, identities, literacies, and liberation. And her goal is to reach diverse students. She claims it is a universal teaching and learning model that helps teachers cultivate the genius within students and within themselves, and teach in ways that create spaces for mutual empowerment, confidence, and self-reliance. Um, but where her model gets a little more specific is, I think, the next part, where she focuses on the history of literacy development and writing practices among Black and Brown communities by reshaping the conversation around underserved communities and reframe curriculum instruction to acknowledge the flaws in the systems with the purpose of reforming them. So in her first book, Cultivating Genius, she defined the term genius is knowing who we are and activating it in every child is done through recognizing it and its origins. So the things that are inherent in us that we inherit from our histories. So the CHRE model that she has adopted to make into the Hill is the culturally and historically responsive education model. It's a framework that responds to long-standing curricular problems held in education that have just been maintained for status quo, that she wants to think of the content areas, the skills, the hard learning that we think of with school, that is decontextualized and abstract from society. And she wants to implant that into a social experience. And she thinks this is done by the five pursuits that are purposeful and they elevate the human genius. That's identity. That's when we make sense of who we are and learn about diverse cultures and identity others in order to learn about them, but also to learn more about ourselves. There's skills, which is what we think more of traditional academics, which is developing proficiencies across content areas and academic standards. There's the intellectual, and that's acquiring a desire to require new knowledge about the world and then apply it to the skills to meet the standards, and vice versa, using the skills that we have learned to meet standards to understand more knowledge about the world. And then there's the criticality aspect. That's a desire that we need to, an acknowledgement to make the world a better place. So by doing this, we need to name, question, and try to understand the oppressions in the world and within ourselves that we inherit or experience and try to disrupt that. And a lot of that is done through joy, where we try to uplift truth, beauty, and wonder and maintain our mental and self wellness to try to answer the world's problems and find personal fulfillment within that. So, throughout this book, she's going to use this framework for building her lesson plans, her unit plans. She takes these 5 pursuits and has created learning targets that focus on all of that. And she provides models that she's practiced with teachers at conferences. Take something at the edge of your desk, a coffee cup. She was able to create a whole set of questions using all of these 5 pursuits that you could make a lesson plan on, a unit plan on, anywhere from the people that cultivate and harvest coffee beans as the identity part to the physics of coffee and how it's used. And that could be the science content. Where is it grown around the world? That's the intellectual. The extent to which the financial wealth that is generated from coffee, how much is it returned back to the communities of color that cultivated and harvested the coffee? That's the criticality. And then the joy is the link between coffee, when consumed in moderation, of course, and a stronger cognitive functions that also promotes a more positive mood. She was she was able to take something right in front of her to pose these questions that hit on all 5 points, pursuits that you could explore. And I think she really emphasizes in practice you can get there. But first, we must unearth ourselves. And that's to get to know our identities and to whom we belong, and in that way, our history. So, in order to understand education as it stands, she claims we must study its history and know how we got to be where we are. She believes that the systems have been created that inhibit and erase joy from school. School has been systematically removed from schools in the effort of learning. And she thinks that it's wild that even in districts that are predominantly populated by people of color, those districts still use models that are not designed to elevate them. They're written by organizations and companies or groups that don't reflect the identity of the people who they're creating this curriculum for. Just a, you know, very generic form just placed down in front of that. And there's the business aspect behind all these different companies that create curriculum. So we have to think about what we can do as educators. And that is our teaching and our learning, whether it be us ourselves learning or our students, has to be centered on justice, liberation, truth, and freedom. And equity, anti-racism, and the application of this method, it's not the work of all of us. It has to be the work of all of us. It can't just be the people that are most affected by it. Like she said, she found in her book that many teachers who are unsure on how to implement this look to Black and brown teachers that kind of lead the way, but it's not their responsibility. It's something that we all have to be committed to. And she said one idea was just to make a list of people who would positively influence you in your life and explore their works and lives and highlight the quotes and ideas of theirs that define your identity as an educator and a role model. I think we could do that with role models and people in our life. So for joy, she says it's the ultimate goal of teaching and learning. It's not just a fleeting feeling of happiness, but a sustained sense of fulfillment and self-determination, self-liberation, and self-empowerment. She says that joy of people of color is such an urgent pursuit because of the efforts to erase it in schools. She says that we often teach the same ways we were taught, avoid what has been normalized. We need to. We teachers have a hard time removing themselves from the way that they learn. And sometimes the things that we already know, we have to unlearn it. And that's the deficit thinking. We can't be thinking in deficit. That goes for all of our students. And she claims that love is the answer to any educational dilemma because love is interrupting the numbness and the distance we feel when others are oppressed, hurt, or harmed. And in that way, we can make joy by making our curriculum a mirror and a window where they can see themselves in it and where they can see themselves going in the future. So she says we should redesign curriculum and assessment because as teachers, we are artists and our curriculum should be artistry. It should allow us to expand on our ideas. We should be able to respect, reflect, and respond to society. And that the world around us is our curriculum. As I shared with the coffee cup, the more fluent we get in curriculum, the more easy it'll be for us to look around us and see everything as an opportunity to teach and learn. She thinks that curriculum is very successful through stories and storytelling. Stories are special in helping children remember. They hold on to things they hear. But in a criticality sense, whose stories have been told and whose have not been taught? And then we need to build legacy. What and how we teach should leave an imprint on the lives of our students and thus then leave an imprint on culture. We need to connect the world with them while simultaneously serving to disrupt the pain and justice found there. We need to have a goal to respond to the pain we see. So what can that look like? She outlined a process for when you're crafting in the Hill model. You got to get to know your students. You interact with them, observe them, with their peers, with others, and share yourself as much as they share with you so they feel safe. She provided in the book student interest inventories that answer a lot of questions that could be very useful in the classroom. You have to assess your students equitably. She says take their measurement, question that gauge their understanding needs academically while seeing where they are in their pursuit of the 5 pursuits. So then you got to draft your curriculum creatively, kind of make sure that creating these plans is joyful. Share them with the students and family to get their input. Pick multimodal text, make some modifications, then teach it. Adjust it, assess it with your students, and then reflect on it as a professional, as you should, is in a growth mindset. So she thinks that none of this is going to work unless the leadership is behind it. It will not be fully realized in any educational space unless it becomes embraced and embodied by its leaders. It has to be a policy. When those in charge do not move from verbal expectations to written policies, they create space for mediocrity, cultural, and historically unresponsive work or oppressive practices. I think that is true. I think we see it even in just the miscommunication and lack of knowledge about what's happening around school due to these reasons sometimes. Just imagine a whole idea around curriculum and growth. So she thinks that leaders who are successful in this, they follow research and education and stay up on leadership methods. They actively seek knowledge of other educational theories, critical theories as well. They're adept at writing and teaching curriculum. They've had experience doing that. They find mentors and scholars in the community to help. They participate in professional development that relates to equity, justice, anti-racism in this format. They tell the truth boldly and unapologetically. They're fluent in writing persuasive arguments to get what they need, and they collect data. I provide 10 ways to use the Hill model on the infographic. On the infographic too, you'll find there's a whole chapter at the end that's focused on artistic interpretations of the Hills model. There's lesson plans, unit plans from active teachers that worked with Goldie and applied it. There's examples from pre-K to 12, learning targets for all the 5 pursuits. There's a range in contact areas with the standards mentioned in the text. And you'll find it on the infographic with the password to access a lot of the same ones. So quick reflections. I thought this was engaging, thought-provoking. It's a dense read. I love the historical aspects, but it was like a celebration of joy. It shows that she was inspired. There's playlists for each chapter based on how like what it meant to her. There was like prompts at the beginning and at the end to reflect on, along with coloring pages. So maybe you can do this reflecting with that. It just it provides a lot of frameworks and a lot of ways to get to know your students and to assess yourself. And I thought it was just a joyful read. It's beautifully bound and presented, and the resources that come with it are incredible. It really made me think a lot. So